Welcome to our monthly ACTS Town Hall. Thanks to our member companies for helping make these town halls possible. Your support makes our mission a reality. Together in safety, stronger in collaboration. The ACTS Town Halls are an open forum to discuss concerns and present potential solutions to improve damage prevention and excavation safety. These town halls are meant to be a discussion, and you're encouraged to ask questions and share solutions. A recording of this town hall will be posted on our YouTube channel and sent via email after the town hall has concluded. Before the end of the town hall, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. We are pleased to have a knowledgeable and experienced panel with us today. So to get us started, our moderator will begin with brief introductions.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this last webinar of 2024. The goal of this call is to kind of touch base on RTK locators, what they are, how they work, how to use them, and really try to help raise awareness of the importance to damage prevention as a whole. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I've got a short slide deck I'm going to go through, and then we're going to get to the panel and ask them some questions and stuff. So really looking forward to hearing whatever one has to say. So thanks again, Abe, James, and Bob for joining us on this call. Your experience and insights are invaluable to this conversation. Thank you. All right, so everyone should be able to see my screen here. We're going to do this as a PDF. So without further ado, RTK utility locating. So what are they? How do we use them? RTK is a mapping solution using satellites and land-based corrections currently, and it's not exclusive to locator wands, but there are, pretty much every major manufacturer out there, Vivac, Subsite, RD, have an RTK solution today. Before we begin, just take a few minutes to be aware of your surroundings. Site safety is important for everything we do. That's really why we locate. That's the whole point of damage prevention in general. So just, if you're working from home, be aware of, your fire extinguisher, first aid kit, things like that. If you're working from an office, always be aware of your site safety plan. The presentation slide deck here, we're going to go through about the speaker, GPS mapping benefits, RTK utility mapping demand. There's a case study from Gopher State One Call in Minnesota that has done an RTK locator pilot. What is RTK? How does it work? Going to go over data collection in the field, data exporting, and then the reason why we're all here, One Call Center role is data hubs. So a little bit about me. I've been in the industry since about 1999, started out in the surveying and mapping side. Worked for a couple different Sioux companies, land surveyors, things like that. Got into locating and joined a group called Planet Underground. I was a project manager, field locator for them for a while. Started writing for the magazine, became editor of Underground Focus magazine, as well as an instructor for Staking U. Became a supervisor and instructor for Southern Cross NAFS, which led me to PG&E. So I was a senior technical instructor for Pacific Gas and Electric Company here in California, doing locate and mark gas leak survey corrosion and just about everything out of their O&M manual. Became a product manager for Sensa Technologies, was the acoustic pipe locator guy there for a while. Most recently, vice president of NAFS, and I founded Subt and Locating Dynamics. So we do utility consulting work as well as locator training and certification. So what are the benefits to GPS mapping? Really, the thing that kind of gave me the idea to put this presentation together was really the goal of industry alignment. So from the public sector and the private sector, over the years, they tend to do things a little bit differently. However, as technology improves, it sort of tends to cross-pollinate at times. Really, the main thing that private locators do differently than public has been mapping, really. The goal of the companies that I used to work for was, we don't have maps, I'm going to go out and make those maps. So I got to literally cut my teeth and learn the hard way of how to do stuff. But the thing we always lean to is technology at the end of the day. damage prevention during excavation, improved asset management, enhanced accuracy, cost, time savings, and safety and risk mitigation are really the key takeaways where GPS can help the public side improve. So the demand for RTK utility mapping has been there for a while. So according to a CGA technology report from 2022, mapping and positioning ranked 89% most likely to impact damage reduction next to locating itself. Mapping information tends to be the lowest quality of information according to the American Society of Civil Engineers 3822. They consider that quality level D information. And the reason for that is you don't really know how that data has been collected and put on that map unless it's referenced and a data quality has been assigned to it. So without getting too far in the weeds on that, quality level A information is the best information you can have, and that's physically exposing the line, dropping a tape measure on it for depth, or taking coordinate data. Quality level B is what we do with locators. So that's going to be EM, GPR, acoustic, RTK. Under that is going to be quality level C, and that's generally if there's a surface structure and you can't get a good locate on it, but you're able to see something at the surface. And finally, quality level D is going to be maps and records. So, I've been in the field, I'm not going to name names, but I've been in the field and I've seen engineers walk up with a print and a highlighter, and they drew a line on the print. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Well, they're going to carry that information into CAD. Well, once it gets in that CAD file, it looks like high quality mapping information. Unless there's that QL tag associated with that, you don't really know how good that data is. So with RTK, GPR and EM are non-exclusive. RTK can be used with any technology out there for locating. The locator is actually what finds the facility, and then RTK is used to get that positional data. The nice thing about RTK locating is it can be used on the fly to stream mapping updates directly to Esri, ArcGIS, third-party mapping software, or first-party. And I really wanted to talk about Gopher State One Call's RTK Locator pilot program, which was actually in the Next Practices report from 2021. So this case study, don't worry, I'm not going to go open it up and read through the whole thing. We're going to put a link up there in the chat. So if you all want to go ahead and read this document after the presentation, I highly recommend it, but the key takeaways, I'm going to go ahead and touch on those. So this was a successful RTK GPS locator pilot where Gopher State One Call worked with municipalities, engineering and design firms, contractors, university, as well as utility and facility owners themselves to seamlessly feed data back into mapping software in real time and update legacy maps on the fly with minimal impact to the workflow. They saw 50% reductions in field time for engineers, and public works departments produced more accurate maps while performing routine 811 locates. This allowed for improved locating efficiency, reduced damages, and better asset management. What you're ultimately doing is creating a feedback loop from the field to the office to the utility owners themselves to update maps on the fly in real time without backwork. This technology is pretty easy to use. The locators and mapping software really require minimal training. I currently teach a one-day locator class for RTK locators, and that is generally sufficient to get people that are used to locating, with experience, how to use this new technology. So what is RTK? In the utility space, we know there's a lot of different acronyms out there. So what does RTK mean? Well, it means real-time kinematic. And simply kinematic, you can think of it in terms of you're on the move. So wherever you are on Earth, they're correcting for that movement. You're able to provide precise location data in real time using global navigation satellite systems such as GNSS like GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, or Baidu to compare satellite and receiver codes, allowing to calculate for and correct for errors on the fly. RTK data can be 1 to 2 centimeters accurate, or here in the US, that's 0.39 to 0.78 inches, using satellites, a cellular connection, and a base station to determine your receiver or rover location. The receiver, for the locating receiver, is what determines utility line location, and that's all interpolated with that satellite information. Data can be filtered to allow only the best quality data is stored. So your locator wands, as we're collecting data, it's collecting everything. You're getting your depth indication, your milliamps used, what frequency is currently set to, where your gain in decibels is, a lot of good information. And if you're off of a certain threshold, it won't allow the technician to store that data. So you're going to have a modem involved. The Internet of Things device is going to be connected through a cell tower, in this case, our locator wand or GPR cart. And then that's going to have a path to the internet from the cell tower. So you're going to need to have a cellular SIM card or modem. The cellular connects to a series of base stations to provide precise location data via corrections over the internet. And that allows you to get that 1 to 2 centimeter accuracy when fixed. You can use a variety of different cell carriers. And the future is going to allow for satellite-based corrections. We're going to start seeing that in 2025 and beyond for our locators. Not everybody wants to juggle a SIM card. Sometimes it's nice to have that mobile hotspot directly to your phone, as Subsite does that. And the new, I think, Vivax does too. And in the future, we're not going to need to have that cellular connection to get to the internet. We're going to be able to ping off of a satellite to get our corrections as well as the coordinate information. So you're also going to have a second subscription for this to work currently, and that's NTRIP. NTRIP stands for Network Transport of RTCM via Internet Protocol, and RTCM is simply stands for the Radio Technical Commission for Maritime Services. That's the protocol that they use to make that connection. NTRIP's going to transmit GPS corrections from a base station to a receiver over the internet. This allows us to get that precise location centimeter accuracy. NTRIP is going to be limited by access to the internet currently via cellular connection. Like I mentioned previously, satellite will be used in the future. NTRIP requires a subscription for user accounts. I've got a link up here for RTK Data. They're one of our friends. They actually provide a $25 off discount, and they have really good international coverage across the US, Europe, Australia. Check them out. I think there's a link coming up there too. So if you're interested, you get a free demo. If you're currently deploying RTK, definitely recommend it. What is RTK and how does it work? Well, the mapping software component is pretty interesting. So some of these RTK locators have first-party software. Some of them require third-party software. The key takeaway here is what used to require 3 or more people to get this data can now be done with one person. When I started out in the industry, I was the surveyor that they said, go out there, go find everything, make sure you don't miss any utilities. And of course, we shrugged, looked at each other and said, what are those? What do those look like? Obviously, over the years, you kind of learn more, and that boils down to training as well. But the key takeaway here is that the person in the field versus the person drawing the map may not be the same individual, and it can kind of become the telephone game, and the quality of the data there can suffer as well in terms of accuracy of field notes, basically. So you can now gather high quality information from the field directly. That field personnel becomes the QA/QC person, ensuring that the high quality data is actually collected on the fly in a single pass. So there's manufacturer specific software that could be available for each device, or like I said before, third-party software. Just some of the examples out there: GeoLantis 360, PointMan, Uinta, TerraFlow Geomatics are some examples. Software is also going to require a subscription for each user. However, once that data has been collected, you can take that and export it in a variety of different file types to use in any mapping software: AutoCAD, Esri, ArcGIS, what have you. CSV files, DXF, Shape, KML are some of those file types. And again, you can also streamline this information directly into Esri or ArcGIS, and they tend to make it very easily. So all these folks up here, all these mapping solutions are all friends of ours. Definitely highly recommend getting a trial, taking them for a test drive, however you want, and decide what's the best option for you. So I mentioned the real-time QA/QC component. So this is pretty nice. You can actually double check your work on the fly, since the data can be uploaded either to a secondary device like an Android phone, an iPhone, iPad, excuse me, Samsung Galaxy Tab, or it can be viewed directly on the device. NMEA stands for National Marine Electronics Association. That protocol allows users to mix and match hardware and software. So obviously, if you're out in the middle of the ocean on a ship, you want all of the hardware and software components on that ship to be able to communicate seamlessly, and that's how they created this protocol that we use to make different devices talk to different devices and software. You can connect third-party devices through Bluetooth. On-the-fly utility line mapping, automatic line drawing can occur in this as well. You can set your feature codes and your mapping codes however your company wants, or there's some default codes as well. You can georeference photos and videos tied to your map with some of the software, and you can create forms and inspection forms for pothole reports, etc. Collecting data in the field with this technology is pretty seamless compared to standard locating. You use your standardized data collection methods with your industry best practices. You're still going to need to make sure peak, null, agree, you have a round field, good current, things like that. All of those locating things definitely still apply to make sure you have good quality data. Collect features as line is located, so there's no backwork. So this will actually stitch points from point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, and draw a line automatically for you. Data can be uploaded to the cloud and third-party mapping software in real time. You can use that to verify points on the fly for quality assurance. So let's say you have an issue in the field. You can send this data directly to the cloud. Somebody in the office can go ahead, open up the software and view what you just did and help you through that. You can use it for audits. I mentioned there is a minimal learning curve for seasoned locate technicians. Currently, I'm recommending 1 year in the field personally, but if you know how to use a locator well without really having to think much about it, you can pick up an RTK locator and start collecting data with pretty much in a day of training. So that data, as I said before, can be filtered to allow only the best quality data is stored. You can set that threshold however you want. Do you want to make sure it's within that 1 to 2 centimeter accurate? Are you concerned about the tolerance zone alone? You can set that in the software and only store that data. You can only store it if it's fixed, or if it's in float, you can set all that however you want. So when it comes to exporting the data, it's very easy. Data can be streamed, or like I said before, exported however you want. You're going to select your different file type, and there you go. You have that export file. You can upload it to any software you want at that point. So one call centers as data hubs has been an interesting conversation. I think this conversation needs to continue for sure. One call centers are already the bridge from the locator to the excavator, as well as the utility owner. One call centers are already the interface. They already house mapping information, and they're very good at it. RTK mapping updates can be reviewed in real time and verified for quality checks, regardless of locate technology used. In the future, maybe it's possible call centers may appoint qualified personnel to oversee this mapping endeavor. However, since it's interfacing a lot of times with the utility owners themselves, they have their own mapping department. They might have that piece of the conversation covered. And as I said before, it's important to understand that the data you're collecting can be filtered to only allow that best quality data is captured. So you don't really have to do any back checks if you don't want to. All right, so that kind of brings us to the end of the slide deck. I told you guys I could get through it relatively quickly. Hopefully I did. If anyone's interested in training, go ahead and check it out. Give me a call. I'd love to help you out there. Shameless self-promotion. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and pass this to the panel. So has there been any questions that have come in the chat?
No, Adam, hadn't seen any yet. I just had a couple of thoughts myself. What you mentioned, this learning curve. What's the upfront investment for something like this in terms of personnel, time, equipment?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Obviously, barrier to entry is what I call that. So it depends on the manufacturer, but you can get a Locator one that works with whatever transmitter you currently have for, I'll say, sub $9,000. That's probably the top, from the ones that are out there. As far as getting any GPS device, probably the cheapest way to do it would be use the locators you currently have, use an RTK device like something like an MLID and an iPhone, and go out there and start collecting points that way, um, using a third-party mapping solution. If you want to do it on the cheap, that's how I would do it. But if you want to do it incorporating RTK locators, there's some really good solutions out there. I see Ken Smith just popped that in the chat. It's a great little device. And I'm not an affiliate of theirs, but Emlet, if you're watching this, give me a call.
So, Adam, is this the part where we open it to the attendees to ask questions of the panel, or do you want us as panelists to comment on the slide deck, or where do you want to go from here?
So yeah, we could do that a couple different ways. So I've got some questions here for the panel. Panelists, if you do have any comments on the slide deck or what we were just talking about, take it away. Folks on the call, if you have any questions for the group, please plop that into the chat and we'll get that to the panel. I say we'll open the floor to Abe, James, and Bob. If you have any comments about the slide deck, we'll start there and then we'll jump into the questions. And if not, we can go straight to questions.
I've got one on the quality assurance program. So if the points are taken at different locations, say while walking down the road, the next guy takes the points 10 feet away from my point. We're still both on the same line. Are those tethered lines going to be the sensor to gauge whether or not I'm 25 inches off on my mark? So if my point is between two existing points, the GPS points aren't going to be wrong or aren't going to be right. So I'm just wondering how that is captured.
Great question. So if you have multiple devices out there in the field, each user is going to have their own line work, right? So for example, if you're using something like the Vivex RTK, if you're out there stitching together a series of points with locator A, and you're going to take that data, pop it into mapping, then you're going to have locator B have those points. You're going to plop that into mapping as well. As long as the information is collected on the same line, peak and null agree, right? That's going to have a factor as well. And you have good satellite connectivity and you have good cellular connectivity, those lines will line up on the facility the same way. If locator A collects the data, you can actually have a waypoint feature where they call it walkback, but ultimately it's a waypoint based off of that coordinate information that it can take locator B straight to that point, and they can start their locate there and connect the dots at that point as well.
We're just wondering if the software connected the dots between two GPS points, that line is drawn, that line is it populated with other GPS points that we don't see?
No, so it's only going to be locator A's data and locator B's data, and then someone would physically have to draw the line to connect those two.
Okay.
Yeah, a good example of that, Bob, is going to be if you have a duct bank, right? You've got multiple electrical lines, we'll say, in a row that are parallel. So not always that's going to be on top of each other unless the contractor put it on top, right? So there's going to be a deviation on that. But for the most part, if they're parallel, you're going to have two people locating at the same time at different frequencies, and they'll be able to track that, and they'll be independent from each other. In some softwares, you can see it, and in some others, you won't be able to see it, depending on whose software that you use. So
So it's similar. I mean, if I'm hovering my arrow over a point, say on Google Earth, I'm getting the GPS coordinates. So hovering an arrow or touching a line between 2 points that were taken along that line, am I going to get a GPS point between those 2 lines? So if I got a GPS point here, GPS point there, it's connected with that tethered line.
Yeah.
If I touch any point on that tethered line, shouldn't there be a GPS maybe for that point I just touched on that line? It's not going to be the ones I gathered, but it should be the self-populated.
Yeah, depending on what type of feature that you're trying to click on, but also in regards to what type of routine that you're going to utilize. So if you're doing like Adam mentioned, a walkback feature, right? You're going to say, I'm choosing this hydrant or this valve, well, for example, because it's kind of sometimes hard to see, or if it's buried, the technician doesn't know where it is, presses the that particular icon, you should be able to see yourself, and it corresponds to a directional waypoint of where you're going. So it'll tell you forward X amount of feet to the left, to the right, whatever, and it'll tell you even depth if depth was even recorded. So yeah, it's going to tell you, like you mentioned, will it show the two different points? Yes, but you'd have to click on it. Now, for some other systems out there, when you're talking about the line feature, that's another routine in the survey workflow, which a lot of systems don't have, okay, because that's a survey background. So depending on the software they're using, yes, it can be done.
All right, we do have some questions popping in through the chat. I'm going to start at the top here. First question, is there a subscription for the VLOC Pro locator that you know of? Subscription. So currently Vivax does not require a subscription for the use of their the mapping software that comes with it. Really, they're not trying to create a mapping software mapping solution per se. They're trying to provide users with an interface to use with whatever mapping solution you want. So currently there isn't a subscription with the Vivax. The cloud-based solution comes with it. Abe?
There is a subscription to the Ntrip setting, right? So
Right.
And the
their
Sims card
actual,
is also-
yep, their SIM card,
Right.
they charge for that, which is minimal,
Yeah.
it's very minimal, but still, that's a great question. So
Yeah, cellular and Ntrip are two things you're going to need subscriptions for, regardless of the manufacturer.
yeah.
Fred asked, where does the data get stored? So that all depends. If you're connecting to a third-party mapping solution, it will point to that. If you're not, it'll go to generally the cloud, like for example, the Vivax. So you can pull that data from the cloud. You can upload it directly. It is stored in the device itself with that. Abe, do you want to talk a bit about the RTK, sorry, the radio detection?
Sure.
Device.
So in regards to the radio detection, and I can talk to any of them, but basically on radio detection for if you're using, GLANIS system, that actually goes right to the cloud through GLANIS. In some of the other older processes of radio detection, that also is stored on the RD itself. And then you download it, your points from your RD to your computer that way. But again, you still would have some type of interface which RD has for that if you just want to store it on the actual collector itself. But either way, you choose whatever flavor you want. I'm just more a promoter of trying to make sure that the quality of work is being done correctly. So one of the things is I try to make sure that technicians are able to see what they're doing, because that allows that technician to correct any work, or even, hey, I chose the wrong symbology for that, or the wrong if it's a valve, but I accidentally hit the hydrant. I don't want to be going back there and trying to scratch my head and say, oh, where was that? And what was that I actually collected? Because you'll see some collections, they just push it through, and next thing you know, you got an invalid information because the person that collected it, couldn't see what they were doing. So that's an issue to me, which is not, from a QA/QC aspect, it's very difficult from management to see that, not unless management, the supervisor that's supervising the technicians has been at that field, and understanding what these layouts are being captured. So again, in that case, hopefully that answers your question without going too much detail.
So the next question here says, can CSV locate information from non-tracer wire locating be pulled into the discussed applications? So that's an interesting question. So I would need a bit more information about where's this information coming from, but the short answer is yes. If it's non-tracer, right? How do you locate non-tracer? Either an inline tracer, such as a Jameson inline duct rotor, maybe sound information. You could use ground penetrating radar or acoustic means to get that information. And yes, you can also go back and use RTK locators to collect further data on those lines as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So the next question says the VLOC RTK Pro can use any corrections. I guess that's not really a question, it's a statement. And yes, you can use any SIM card. Currently, I'm using a T-Mobile prepaid SIM card in mine, but he's mentioning Mint Mobile, AT&T, I believe even Verizon at this point. So it's kind of helpful.
Just a little FYI on that. So yes, you can use pretty much any carrier. It's just you have to understand your particular area. There are stronger, what I would suggest is understand how strong your bandwidth is in that particular scenario where you're at geographically, because you don't want to be, utilizing a, I don't want to say substandard, but a low latency or a high latency frequency, because again, you need that connection. So you don't want your Wi-Fi to go from 5G all the way down to non-existent because you're in an area. So take a look before you purchase anything, understand your area of exactly where you are geographically, so that way you get the best quality connection.
That's a great point, Abe. And something else to consider too is people think you just need data with these, but believe it or not, you do need a talk and data plan, at least in my experience, to make sure that it's functioning correctly. What is the benefit of using an RTK locator if the utility owner already has detailed GIS with high precision accuracy? Interesting.
I want to work there.
So I'm gonna go back as far back in my career as over a decade ago. Atlases. If anybody on the call has ever had experience using a utility atlas, raise your hand. I'm gonna raise my hand. So with a utility atlas, you can have a utility line located anywhere in the right-of-way. Thank you. Ben raised his hand as well. So you probably already know what I'm about to say, and you can see a line in a right-of-way, and just because the utility line's on the left side of that right-of-way doesn't mean it isn't on the right side of the right-of-way. It's just saying there's a line somewhere in this right-of-way. The fun thing there is too, when we're talking about mapping, Morgan, good to see you. Definitely. So it's just an indication that there's a utility line somewhere in this right of way. So even if you were to take that atlas, say print it out, maybe you're viewing it on an iPad, you walk into the field, where's the right of way, right? The back of curb isn't necessarily where the right of way starts. The back of walk, not necessarily. You'd have to know where the monuments are, things like that, and actually get an indication. But even if you know where the right of way is, the atlas isn't telling you where the facility is in that right of way. The demand for this, and the reason why ASCE 3822 states that QLD, or the worst quality data available to locators and excavators, is mapping information, is like Bob said, I want to work there. Maps are guidelines, right? We use the old adage in training, trust but verify. Some of the folks from the 80s might remember that Reaganism, but it's guidelines to use to help you do your locate. But one word of caution is we tell locators in training all the time, don't try to paint the map. If you do that, you're going to be getting into some trouble. So let the locating equipment tell you where the facility is versus forcing it. Does that make sense? And I'm sure, Bob, you probably say the same thing in your training as well. Yeah. So there is a lot of benefit to close that question. Updating maps and records, verification as a whole is key for locating. I tell people don't paint over your own marks, even if you did this 6 months ago, because today you're a much better locator than you were 6 months previously. So there's always a need for better maps.
Rarely do you get a second chance to get it right the first time. So yeah, it's
Yeah, Bob, I tell folks as a locator, you're sort of an unsung hero in the construction industry if you do things right. It's when you don't do things by the book, when you get into problems, and no one's going to care about all those times you got it right. It's the one time you get it wrong that it's going to matter. So we've got another recommendation here from Ken, recommending close interval data collection. Some software such as PointMan, you can stake back to the line created by the points collected. So yeah, I believe a lot of these solutions now have that walkback feature, or they call it stakeout or waypoint finding, where you can even use that for quality control audits and things like that. I was part of an R&D project before. I think we did 900 different survey collected gas main tees that we went back with RTK devices to sort of validate them. And the interesting conversation there was, why is the RTK locator saying it's maybe 9 inches off versus where the survey collected points were on the main and the service? Well, we're locating a wire, right? At the end of the day, we're not locating a plastic pipe. We're locating a magnetic field that's being emanated from something made of metal, right? So something to consider there too as well. So how is the data drawings being advertised or presented to clients? Depending on the state or regulating agency, this can be considered surveying, which is a professional service. This is a great one. I think it's important to make sure the language, right? So thanks, Morgan. So we're not trying to be a Sioux company by using RTK locators. We're not trying to muddy the waters. So remember, let's say Sioux or surveying in itself is a professional service, but Sioux is a process, right? We're talking about a process that needs this technology to function, right? So as a locator with RTK, we're not just magically waving a wand, becoming a Sioux organization. We're part of that process. So this is in terms of collecting data for a utility company. So two different, right? We've got the public and private side. Qualifying language is important. So, obviously you can't say you're a surveyor and engineer without a stamp. That's the definition of that professional service in this question. Does the panel have any comments on this?
Yeah, so you're totally correct, Adam, in regards to answering that question, because technically, yes, we are not a Sioux company. We're not surveyors. Basically, that's where it falls under. And for anybody that's going to use it as a survey tool, they better have someone who's licensed on premise in regards to not only working for one, but also in regards to having one on staff, right? So, for myself, I used to work for a Sioux company, or actually a landscape, or not landscape, land surveyor and architectural engineering firm. So we started up the Sioux side because they needed more information in regards to the underground. And because of my background, that was easy to do. So that was not a problem. The issues that a lot of people are fighting against is, okay, if you're not a Sioux company, how are you doing it? Well, you're providing a service for, as long as you're contracted by a licensed surveyor, then that should be more than adequate, because they're the ones that's stamping and overseeing your project. So that's key in regards to understanding the lingual, but also, we're just collecting information, right? We're mapping it, but we're just collecting it for the purpose of, letting the experts identify where that particular tool or that particular line is. So in regards to, does it really quantify you as a surveyor? No. I mean, are you race car driver, a professional race car driver if you're behind a vehicle? You have a license, hopefully, but again, it's one of those issues, the problem is a lot of it's because of attorneys that want to make more money. So, but in this case, I understand and respect the land surveyors. They are professional people that, went through schooling, and they do deserve it, and they are the ones that stamp, and also engineers that do stamp. So depending on which state you're in. So
Yeah, I just want to touch on that piece too. Not all locating work and not all line work, I guess, does require a stamp or does require professional service. If you're working in a private work area, and let's say, excuse me, all the bloodhounds of the world, the GPRSs, all the private locators out there, not all of those are sue companies, right? And that's okay as long as you're not signing. My understanding of it, as long as you're not offering a professional service or making a claim to, then generally you're okay, right? Don't quote me on that. I'm not a lawyer. Don't, don't take that and run with it. But not all locating work or coordinate data collection does require a stamp, but some does, right? So for the purpose of this call and the sake of time, I wanted to touch on the data collection piece and how does it get back to the utility owners. And James, I wanted to pitch you this question. So as as a member of One Call, you run a call center. What do you think about incorporating RTK utility locators in the field to get this information back to utility owners to help excavators dig safely?
Thanks, Adam. And for the benefit of those on the call who don't know me, my name is James Wingate. I'm the executive director at USA North 811. We're the 811 contact center that serves Northern and Central California and all of Nevada. So hopefully there's going to be a future CGA white paper, but I ran into a water district recently, and since I don't have their permission to say this right now, I'll hold off. But anyway, they have GPSed all of their water system. It took them 10 plus years to do it, but this is before everything got so affordable as it is now. But since they've had it GPSed in the last 9 years, they have located their tickets with 99.9% accuracy. And that's 50,000 tickets, not just tickets received or tickets cleared, but when they actually rolled a truck, deployed a technician, and paint was put on the ground, they located their assets 99% of the 99.9% of the time for 50,000 of those locates. That's amazing. Any utility operator would love to have that kind of data. And they also feel confident in sharing those maps with engineers for design purposes and things like that. So why I like the concept of the RTK locators is because, in my opinion, utility operators really need to map their assets with precision. And in some ways, the cities are actually ahead of the curve compared to some other operators. But the Minnesota project is a great example. And if those on the call, if you're not familiar with it, I'd encourage you to read it. Minnesota's doing a couple great things, including buying a couple of these instruments and loaning them to small utilities to show the value of letting them map their assets. But, even from a strictly damage prevention perspective, what if an asset it's on a busy road where there's a lot of work being done constantly? What if that gets located 3 or 5 or 10 or however many times you think is important with the RTK, and every single time it comes back within some minimal variation, then you can use that to update your GIS automatically. And what if the future is now next time you can have your locator go out and paint without having to hook up and relocate if you've done it enough times that you trust it? Or why not a drone go paint it? Or why even paint, period? Why not send that to the excavator and he can use his phone? And someday this is going to be 3D, and I know Urban and some others are playing with that. And or maybe there's a monitor in the backhoe and the boom won't go down because they know there's a cable right there. I mean, all this tech is on the fringe of being mainstream. As soon as we get the asset owners to know where those assets are with precision. So I would love to see the One Call centers help how we can. And if that means that we host data, whether it's abandoned line data or potholing data, I'm happy to do that and then share it with the next excavator who gets there. I'm not sure about us being a hub for stuff coming from RTK instruments for us to host before it gets to the operator, but I'm totally open to experimenting and piloting. Storing data is not as expensive as it used to be. And maybe we do that for small operators. I mean, part of your slide deck at the beginning, Adam, was allowing them to stream it directly into ArcGIS. And so I know that, if it's a small operator who doesn't have in-house GIS expertise, maybe we could host that for them or something like that. So I'm totally open to all those things. And I think many one-call centers, yes, this is kind of pushing the edge of what we have historically done as centers, but I think we recognize the concept of us being a central hub for communication between excavators and utility operators. And if that means helping to store, centimeter level accuracy data because the operator can't store it themselves, I'm totally open to that possibility.
So a couple of things in regards to what James was saying and Adam. Um, since my stint with Pelican Corp, I'm able to travel across the globe in regards to what Pelican Corp already offers in regards to the one call, the 811 scenario, but also in regards to the mapping side. So I'm the GeoLannis expert on that in regards to taking that information from the field and putting it back into the appropriate people's destination in regards to, is it going to a client or is it going back to a one call system, right? So to answer some of the James's question in regards to, is there already? Yes, there are. Pelican already has a system out in Europe and Asia area in regards to having that data already being transferred after it's been quantified by the appropriate technician or management before it goes to the one call. So that information automated right into their system. And part of that is they already have where they have quality data as an excavating company. They have it already on their iPhone as long as that person or company is associated with the one call system. They have a link already for that perimeter of where they're trying to access. It tells them exactly where those lines are. Now it's a visual map, right? So I could be out in with my cell phone seeing where it is. They don't know it from a GPS standpoint. By law, they still have to call a locating company to come out there and paint it down, right? So that person comes out. Now, when that excavating company does their work, within 48 hours, they're mandated to actually create an as-built, bring it back to the one call system. So they're getting true level A, right? Level A coordinated positioning of where that pipe is, where that valve is, wherever, and they're able to do that already. So it's just different here in the States and in Canada in regards to, how does the system work? Is because, there's some bylaws and all that prevents us from actually continuing. And each state is different. So, we could talk offline in regards to furthering that, but, there are systems already out there. We're just one of them. And, I look at, the future of damage prevention is, they already have, from my background in having excavators already, this is 10 years ago or 20 years ago back, where in 3D, these excavating companies already know from a BIM model, they're actually prevented from going further. Like you mentioned, it's already been there, coming from the BIM side, building information modeling, and then coming to here, this is always the backlog, right? We're finally seeing the fruits of what has already been done years ago is now coming into fruition into 3D. I know we're working on a new map engine right now that will basically you'll have your iPhone or your tablet, your Samsung, or we're looking into glasses that actually have 3D lines as you're visualizing in the field. So though that's coming on board, that's the future. We see from a safety, but also in regards to information of getting that information from the field to back to the office sides. That way people can make decisions and update those maps. So that way again, it's all about damage prevention. So if we could do that, that's going to save lives. That's going to save dollars in the long run. You guys had that lawsuit just recently out there in Santa Fe, I think it was, the 1.8 million, just because of bad mapping.
San Diego,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So again, whose fault is it? Well, it's our own. We live in a society that and again, I don't want to get into that discussion, but basically, yeah, it can be done. So.
Yep. So we've got we've got Morgan plopping something else into the chat here. Yes, GPS absolutely has limitations. RTK, for example, doesn't work where there currently isn't cell service. In the future, there will be satellite-based corrections, but right now, if you're in a hilly area, you're in the mountainous areas, or you're out in the middle of nowhere, RTK is not the solution for you because you can't connect to cellular, right? Same thing applies to the chat here talking about just limitations of GPS in general. Yes, obviously make sure your datum is correct. So there is a lot of different datums, and without getting too far in the weeds, just think of it in terms of a projection or a grid. There's different size fishing nets, there's different size laundry bags, if you will. So some of them have smaller holes, some of them have a larger hole, depending on the size of the grid. That's the best analogy I could make for what a datum is. It's in terms of relationship to. Well, we live on a round planet. Sorry, flat earthers. But it's a projection of where you're at. That's probably the best way I could describe it. So we've got a SOC 3 question. Abe, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, so the SOC 3, that's for some organizations, they are requiring that. That's more of a case-by-case scenario in regards to, from a security standpoint, of where how is the data being secured. And there's only a few companies that are SOC 3 ready, and that's something that depends on who you're marketing it to, right? Your product. So, there's a lot of people that just still don't know about that. And, to me, it's one of those things that it's a security issue for those people that are really looking to, secure their particular product. Is it something that's costly? Yes, it's very costly for us. Like, for example, if we wanted to be more of a SOC 3, yeah, that's something that we need to look at in regards to, providing that. If there are companies out there that are requesting it, so be it. But at this point, there's not that many people that are requiring that particular certification. So.
We have another question here, or statement actually. So MLID will allow you to supply your own base and get corrections through LoRa. So yeah, so any manufacturer, you're talking Trimble, StoneX, MLID, you name them, they all still to this day provide the traditional base and rover setup where it connects through a radio link. So if you're in an area such as I mentioned before where you don't have cellular, you could still set up a base station and use a rover to collect data points that way. Traditional, GPS rover-based setup.
Adam, we just have a few minutes left. I just wonder if each of the panelists might want to sort of wrap up with a minute or two statement about some things they had on their mind.
Thanks, Randy. Bob, you've been a little quiet here on this chat, so I'm going to start with you. Take it away. The floor is
yeah.
The floor is yours.
All right. Hello. So I'm sharing my screen. Panelists, do you see that screen?
Yep.
All right. Hi, I'm Bob. I'm a locator. I've been in the industry about 38 years. Before that, I was a splicer for the Air Force. I do know that when we are mapping, we're definitely need to look down and push buttons. When we're locating, we need to do the same thing. And unfortunately, most of our unlocatable lines are out under the pavement. If we can get inline valves on that GPS, get those points, and then it automatically draws the line, that would be great. But then we also have the service lines. These require me to, in a lot of my locate machines, I would need to start a new file for each service, new file for each leg of the line, start overlaying that. We got about 35 million miles out there on the right of ways. Some brand new, some dead, and or actually the abandoned ones are buried with the live ones. From the outside, they all look the same. So we need to be very careful. This project, I think, during COVID, they actually performed some SUE before they even put the project out for bid. All utilities were moved out of the way thanks for some forethought. So with some good maps and still using the SUE practice, I think that's where we need to be. We're all on the same side. Now, there isn't a single source that can locate an underground line except for maybe a vac truck or a backhoe or a trencher or an auger. Electronically, we're not marking the line. We're marking what we assume to be top dead center of the line. So if we can map our signals, and that's what we're doing, is mapping our signals. We got an extra line put in close to us. Now, the next time we locate that line, our signals might be a little skew, might pull towards that new line that was just put in a foot or two from us. So out on private properties, rarely are these mapped. This is where a lot of work comes into the surveyors. So mapping as you mark it, like I said, each line needs its own file. So there is going to be a learning curve. And unfortunately, right now, one of the hot topics that the DIRT report is late locates. So to ask an 811 locator to add a minute or two to his work when they're already, backlogged up to their ears. Right now, or this year may not be the best while this fiber brigade is going on across the country, but it is really simple to do. And then the go back feature, I see that working great on damage investigations. But the vacuum excavation truck is the only one that can allow us to see it safely. It's non-intrusive. That's what we look for, is non-intrusive investigation. So for locators, we're looking for how many lines are there, what size are they? I need that for my mark. What does the engineer know about these lines? If you look at this print on the bottom, I see question marks by that measurement. That's not verified. That's the information they got in at the department, so that's what they're putting out. So if it's junk in, junk out, there's washing their hands of the liability there with question marks. Oh, fun. So rarely are they drawn to scale. I mean, this is a picture of a cable map. We've got a coaxial cable and a conduit there going up to this community college. This little handhole is not here in the middle of the parking lot. It's actually right up here next to the building. So that's kind of what we're tasked with. Now, during a training class, I had one of my I can do it guys just take the machine and go. He said, I'm going to go map this water line. Well, when we went back to the office and loaded it, he obviously wasn't aware about the taking the points in order. So what you're seeing here on point number 21 is a survey nail he seen while he was locating, and thought, I'm going to get a shot on that survey nail just to check the accuracy. Now, this was a current survey project, so there was a surveyor on site. So he thought he'd get a shot on that nail just to, and surprisingly, it was less than 1/100 of an inch off. But you can kind of see the line it's drawn when he starts going out of order. Ran over here for a valve, ran over here for a valve, came back here for these meters. It looks all scrambled. So we really need to be very aware that we are building a map now. Do these lines in order. When you say do them on the fly, that kind of worried me, because a lot of times we're just, there's a valve, let me go get that. There's a hydrant, let me go get that.
Yeah.
And then locating the main at the same time.
Yeah, when it boils down to the training, it's starting and stopping the line as a big component, as well as using a feature code to grab those features and then start a new survey, start a new line. So that's definitely part of the workflow, part of the way that we train. So you have a line that makes sense. You don't have a line that's an hour long because you forgot to stop your survey and you continue to the next job or something. So
yeah. So the data, I mean, like the VLOC Pro 3, color codes, it compares peak and null, etc. That to me doesn't stand out enough as a warning. When I see that point on the map, I'm feeling pretty assured. And if I look at the quality level of that information, now I see that this must have been a distorted signal. So we are locating top dead center, what's assumed to be a perfectly round signal waves. When waves of same frequency collides, we have a new shape of a wave. Now, the depth that we're grabbing, that's not a fact until we see the line. Now, the depth estimation is to the center of that pipe. If I set the tip of my wand on it, 6-inch pipe gives me a 3-inch depth estimation. So again, I'm seeing the pipe, so I know that's a depth measurement. Until I see it, it's a depth estimation. So what scares me is if excavators get hold of this information, setting up a bore plan.
5'7", steel-toed boot, 7'6".
Yeah, that's sorry. That was me down in Texas. So setting up bore plans or making, I'm going to go ahead and set this drill to go 12 feet deep. I've got a map of every line in the road that says the deepest one there is 8 feet. So that we don't want them to get, self or too much confidence in what we're providing. And that's a location of a top dead center of a signal, not the actual precise location of the line. So things that affect that measurement, things that affect the accuracy is going to be turns, T's, crossings, and about every area of signal interference. Not just the depth's going to be incorrect, but also the location. So in the underground world, there's a lot of these. The only way we're going to guarantee it is to see it. So I did get some breaking news when I turned on the TV this morning. By 2029, AT&T plans to abandon a large portion of their legacy copper systems. So that's going to be interesting there at the end. So that's all I have. I hope I didn't do that too fast or too slow.
All right. Thank you, Bob. We're going to move it to James. We're a few minutes over, but definitely appreciate you being on the call, Bob. And James, I see you put your info in the chat.
I did.
Anything you want to close with?
No, just, I mean, I can't comment on the technical side. I'm not a geophysicist. My background is in GIS, but I can't claim any expertise in locating. So, but yeah, I'm very interested in the one call centers hosting data. I think that's the future. I think, well, anyway, I could talk for an hour about this topic. So anyone who wants to talk about how the one call center is involved, I also am a best practices or a co-chair on the CGA's OCSI committee. So I'm in touch with all the other centers. So happy to talk if anyone wants to follow up with me about that.
Sounds good. James, I will be in touch. I definitely want to have you on the podcast relatively soon. So
sounds good.
Definitely. Abe, what do you have for us in closing?
In closing, thank you very much for everybody that's attended. Adam, thank you for allowing us to be on this panel. James, it was great meeting you. And Bob, nice seeing you again. For the most part, be safe out there. We're always looking to, progress our products and trying to help people out there that wants to learn more about how to proficiently locate, but also collecting that information so that way they have proper maps as a deliverable. And then the other aspect of that is, in regards to, taking that information and really be confident in regards to what you're doing. Because, as a locator prior, I know, there are things that happen, and as long as you could put that in your collection system, and saying, yeah, I felt that there's a lot of distortion, as long as you're able to record that, you're covered. It's just being transparent enough for you to allow the decision makers to do what they need to do. And that's always what I try to help the industry experience, because just because you might not think that there's something there, put an end of line feature. If you have one of those features that you could put on there, do it, because you're right there. Who better to locate it than the locator that's already out there, right? Yeah, your eyes in the field, like Bob said, it's you're there, you know what you're experiencing, and communicating that is the other aspect of that. And if you have the right tools in regards to properly documenting it, then everything should be fine and you could sleep at night. And that's one of the things that I like to do is sleep at night. And when I sleep, I'm sound asleep. Ask my wife because she bugs me to say, "Hey, stop snoring." So.
There you go. All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks again, everyone. I'm plopping my the slide up here one last time simply because I can't put my information in the chat, guys. If you can see the screen here, it's got my contact information. Adam Zachary again. Give me a call, shoot me an email, find me on LinkedIn. Love to help you guys out. We do training of pretty much every proven locate technology out there, certification classes, EM, GPR, acoustic, SPAR. Believe it or not, I still train SPAR, RTK, and then there's something new up and coming called the Gemini drone that I can't really talk about on this call, but it's pretty cool. So give us a shout. There's a lot of good training organizations out there as well. Hit up Bob if you need some training as well. Feel free to reach out. Really appreciate all of you on the call. And thanks again to Acts Now for allowing us to talk at you for the past hour or so. So be safe out there, folks. Take care.
Thanks to all of you, our panelists, and our moderator for sharing your expertise. Please take a moment now to fill out a brief survey that will be posted in the chat so we can continue to improve these discussions and address topics that are important to you. Be sure to register for next month's Town Hall by visiting our website. Again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next month.